Number 10. Ninja Assassin Fighting Skills. Though she uses her telekinetic abilities a lot in a fight, and I mean a lot, Betsy doesn't need to rely on them to beat someone in hand-to-hand combat. Her skills as a ninja assassin have been reinforced on a few different occasions. At one point she was trained by the hand, but she also inhabited the body and, for a while, kind of the mind of Quanon, a skilled ninja assassin, whose body she swapped with in a controversial and pretty ridiculous storyline, and who also seemed to have purple hair, possibly even natural purple hair, as opposed to Betsy's original's body's dyed purple hair. Betsy also became such a skilled assassin that she even admitted during her time on Cable's X-Force that she was addicted to killing. So, you know, she's like a super assassin. Anyways, she tries not to kill people anymore. Number 9. Blast Immunity. Due to the fact that they share genes and similar powers, Cyclops has blast immunity when it comes to his brother Havoc's blasts. His brother can devastate and obliterate anything he locks onto with his own shockwave-like blasts, which are emitted from his body, often more specifically his hands. Well, that is unless he targets Scott. Alex himself likewise has immunity to Scott's optic blast as well. Well, usually anyways. And to be clear, they can still attack one another, but the damage is simply negligible. It can be easily shrugged off due to their built-up immunity to each other. And when it comes to his own blast, Scott is completely immune. That's how he still manages to have eyelids and can even prevent his eyes from emitting optic blasts when they are closed shut. Though he does still often have to sleep with his ruby quartz visor to be safe. I always like to imagine him with like a ruby quartz like eye mask. I think that would be super cute. Probably never gonna see that in the comics though, might be too cute for Scott. Not for me though. Number 8. Energy blasts. While many get triggered when I use the term laser eyes in videos, the reality is I do it to poke loving fun at the inconsistency of Scott Summers' powers. It's part of his comic book history. We may refer to the energy he emits from his eyes as optic blasts now, but the truth is optic blast was actually a term coined for him after his powers were retconned. Originally, Scott's powers were explained in that his eyes absorbed energy from the sun, and that solar energy was actually what created the blast. Hot, solar energy. The only thing that could contain this solar energy was ruby quartz. This meant that his powers could be depleted and would sometimes need to be recharged. At one point he even managed to harness lunar energy to use instead, although lunar energy wasn't shown to be quite as effective, not quite as powerful. However, a lot of fellow comic book nerds had some questions regarding Cyclops' powers in terms of how they were supposed to work, and the source for his main ability was changed. Now his eyes would be known as portals to another dimension, overflowing with energy, where the logic of our world's physics did not apply. This made his powers appear more versatile, more limitless, and allowed writers more creative license with them. It also appeased fans, so just kinda weird. I love that like we think that that makes more sense. Oh, they're a portal to another dimension. No, yeah, that's fine, that's fine. Number 7. Visor. Okay, so we all know that Cyclops has a visor, and that his visor helps him flip the switch for his optic blasts. But what you might not know is that when he fires blasts in the comics and you see him clenching his fists, that's not just a flair for the dramatic. That fist clenching also has to do with controlling his powers. Say what? It's true. The controls for his visor are actually inside his gloves. They're comprised of a series of small buttons sensitive to pressure, allowing him to change the size of the opening in the visor and have very precise control over how much damage he wants to inflict, as well as where he wants to target that damage to. This may sound like a silly place to put said buttons. What if you accidentally clenched your fist in frustration? Until you realize this also gives Scott access to his powers even when restrained. Also means he can just take off his gloves and go to sleep with his visor on. So pretty cool. Tie his hands, he can still use them. Put him to bed, he just takes off his gloves. Useless. Number 6. Superior DNA. Despite having siblings who appear more powerful than him, Mr. Sinister has always had and continues to have an obsession with Scott Summers. Why? Well, he's also obsessed with the whole Summers line, of course, but according to him, Scott is the genetic key to creating the most powerful mutant of all time. This is due to his superior DNA. But what does that mean? Well, I don't know exactly. I'm still waiting for Mr. Sinister's TED Talk on mutant DNA to help explain this whole thing in layman's terms. But for now we just have to trust the villainous geneticist on this. I mean, I doubt he would have manipulated Scott's entire life on the scale that he has without facts to back up his claim. So he just has superior DNA. He just has it. Some people, they're just born with it. Some people, it's Maybelline. Number 5. Telepathic defense. While we're not always aware of this power for a multitude of heroes, I feel like it has become a secret must must have if you just want to be part of the X-Men team. Everyone on the X-Men seems to just have it without our knowledge until it just randomly comes up in the comics. But I guess that's what happens when you work alongside and fight against so many powerful telepaths. Actually, this ability was harnessed and strengthened by Scott through rigorous training with Professor Charles Xavier, and through his close connection to one of the strongest telepaths in the Marvel Universe, Jean Grey, and later his relationship with another accomplished telepath, Emma Frost. Although his telepathic defense didn't protect him from having Jean uncover his psychic affair with Emma Frost, so yeah. Ooh. Feel like that would have been a good time to flex that defense. Be like, ooh, don't find out. Oh well, she would have found out anyways. He would have told her because he loves her. Number 4. Super Trigonometry. Due to his danger room training, Cyclops is insanely skilled when it comes to his optic blasts. I'm sure it's hard enough to just aim using your eyes, as I don't think it would actually be as intuitive as we all think. And even the flick of your eyes to a different direction mid-battle could mess with where you are targeting. You'd also have to be quite focused. Scott is not only skilled when it comes to targeting with his blasts in general, but he can also bounce his optic blasts off surfaces, knowing which angles to approach in order to bounce the blast around in a less direct manner, avoiding obstacles and catching his opponents unawares. And in fact, firing his optic blast in a specific direction also requires a lot of control with his visor, as his eyes don't really allow him to focus a blast. It's often depicted that his visor is actually more where specific targeting comes in. I think he's got like panels that allow him to like adjust the angle. Part of this skill is practicality, and part of it is mind math, known as his super trigonometry skills. You do not want to play pool with Cyclops if he's using his blast. He will beat you. He will definitely beat you. Ooh, Hawkeye versus Cyclops in pool, who would win? These are the questions. Number 3. Black Vortex. The Black Vortex is a construct that allows those who possess it to unleash their full cosmic potential. In Cyclops Volume 3, a younger version of Cyclops from the past was working with his dad Corsair and the Starjammers, who were actually tracking the Black Vortex, and Cyclops ended up being imbued by its energy after he and his teammates, young Iceman and Groot, became trapped on the ship where the Vortex was and had to fight their way out. They all decided to submit to the Vortex, and in so doing were granted its cosmic power, becoming the most powerful versions of themselves. Cyclops himself had an awesome suit that appeared to allow him to channel his blast through his eyes, his head, his neck, and his chest. And instead of his visor, he's actually wearing a mask, implying that he has more control over his blast ability. Also, Iceman looks like an ice elf, and it's like super cute and awesome. I just love a good ice elf. Also that hair, he has such nice long hair. Elves are so cute. Number 2. Breaks Adamantium. During the Age of Apocalypse storyline, Cyclops and Wolverine end up on opposite sides of the battle. Cyclops found himself temporarily allied with Apocalypse, and although in falling for the rebel and prisoner Jean Grey felt like he might be switching sides, this all ended up happening not quite fast enough. He came to blows with Logan, known as Weapon X in this alternate timeline, who showed up and fought to free Jean by himself. Unsurprisingly, once again, even in this alternate timeline, Jean was a huge part of these two's dislike for one another, and without the mutual cause of Xavier and the X-Men to unite them, their fight became a brutal one. Cyclops lost an eye and proved the power of his blast when he ended up breaking through Logan's adamantium-coated skeleton, severing his hand. Was it the left hand or the right hand? I feel like in comics, I feel like it was the left hand, but that's some real trivia for you. Tell me which hand it was. Number 1. Spirit Bomb. What's better than optic blasts? Happiness blasts! Yep, Scott one time used his power to channel happy thoughts through his eyeballs in order to stop an alien invasion, with a little help of course from his friends. This was back in the 70s in Volume 1 of Uncanny X-Men. Of course it's from the 70s. A race of aliens known as the Xenox threatened to destroy the Earth using the proximity of their piloted homeworld's gravity, but they had one huge weakness: their fear of positive emotions. Meaning that when Charles Xavier channeled all of Earth's positive thoughts and passed them telepathically onto Jean, who in turn passed them on to Alex Summers, who boosted them with cosmic rays, and passed them on to Cyclops, whose eyes they came out of in a beam of hot and awesome intensity, which was then cooled somewhat by Iceman as the beam made its way straight to the Xenox, the invaders were successfully scared off, defeated. Man, that's a lot of passing. That's like, these guys should play like sports more, I think. They'd be so good at it. And that's how Cyclops' spirit bomb ability saved the planet. Sure, he needed help, but geez, what a plot. So yeah, he can use his eyes to channel other things sometimes. Fun fact. Thanks for watching, Nerd Squad. I hope you learned something new about Scott Summers, one of the most iconic X-Men, for good or for bad. Regardless of your opinion of his character, he really is one of the central players when it comes to the X-Men team and many of their storylines. Number 10. Kinetic Energy. While some who are less familiar with Gambit just think of him as a man with card tricks, the truth is that he is so much more than that. His power isn't just throwing explosive cards, though it might appear that way to the uninformed eye. Gambit's true powers are to kinetically charge any object that he comes into contact with, setting it to explode on impact or time the explosion. He once charged his gum that he was chewing in his mouth and spat it at an enemy when it seemed that he would otherwise be a goner, with a sword at his throat. Ooh. Guess Gambit is lucky he wasn't in Singapore, where importation and selling of gum is illegal. True facts. While he may seem super in control of these powers, he actually constantly fears that he isn't, and even made a deal with Mr. Sinister to help him have more control over them. Yet in the comics, the control he does demonstrate is pretty impressive, making one wonder what a fully in control Gambit would be capable of. We're getting there. We're getting there. Number 9. Poker Master. Remy's love of cards comes from his thieving background. He grew up stealing and gambling and actually earned quite a bit of money doing so, but more about his wealth another time. As such, he has an insane level of skill as a poker player. We see him beat out his X-Men squad in a friendly tournament in X-Men Volume 2, Issue 48. It comes down to him and Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball, who insisted he'd actually never played before, but actually has been playing poker for years with his siblings before coming to the X-Men. Yeah, I've tried that before, Sam, with Catan, so I know your tricks. And he is actually a bit of a pro himself. But even he is no match for Remy. When it seems like Gambit accidentally charged the cards on purpose to make them explode so he wouldn't have to reveal his full final hand, we find out that although he forfeits, he had the winning hand, and chose to throw the game in favor of Sam, as Storm picks up the remnants of his smoking ace, which would have given him a royal flush to Sam's full house. And if you play poker like I do, you should know, royal flush is like the best you can get. Royal flush. Number 8. Super reflexes and agility. Have you ever noticed how Gambit almost never misses when throwing one of his cards? Or how he almost never gets hit when others are aiming for him? This is because he has superior reflexes and agility. His movements are basically acrobatic. This helps him as a Master Thief as well, often allowing him to sneak into places and out unnoticed. And it allows him to dodge lasers on a Matrix level, and bullets on a Matrix level actually as well. He has also been able to avoid getting hit by projectiles himself and save others from getting hit by simply being quick enough to catch them, and often throw them back at the people that aim them at him. Number 7. Bojutsu. When Gambit first made his appearance in Uncanny X-Men Volume 1, Issue 266, he actually was not seen using his famous playing cards. Instead, we met Gambit with metal spikes in hand, almost like darts. Like many of his fellow mutants, first appearances can be deceiving, and many of the X-Men needed some time to evolve and settle before becoming the iconic characters we know them as today. I mean, look at how much Beast has changed from his first appearance. And in fact, while we've come to know Gambit for his explosive playing cards, he is also skilled with weapons as well, specifically his bow staff. His accuracy both with his staff and anything he chooses to turn into a projectile is impressive. He rarely misses his targets, and even is accurate and skilled enough to use his staff to deflect bullets, and powerful enough to destroy a danger room bot with one swift blow of his staff. Number 6. SAVATE. Aside from his skill with his staff, Remy LeBeau is also skilled with his hands as well. I mean, his fists. His fists. He is a master of SAVATE. What does that mean? It means that he is a French kickboxing master. What makes French kickboxing different from English kickboxing? Well, I'm not sure. I assume it's similar, but in French? Oui oui, mon chéri. It's actually like standard kickboxing, but it's more graceful. Fun fact. His hits would also be more powerful using this technique, as he has a supercharged metabolism that makes his strikes land with more force. Nick Fury even said that Gambit was one of the best hand-to-hand fighters he had ever seen. Number 5. Hypnotic Charm. Have you ever wondered why so many ladies have the hots for Gambit? Well, it could be because of this subtle and sometimes lesser known ability. Remy is charming just on his own, but he also possesses a power known as Hypnotic Charm. This power allows him to have slight control over another being through the power of suggestion, basically like Cajun Jedi mind tricks. He can suggest something to you that you might be inclined to follow through with or agree with him on. Some have even suggested that he may have used his influence to make Rogue fall for him. However, this power is not particularly strong, so it is unlikely that this theory is true, and more likely that the two just fell in love organically. Because as soon as someone becomes aware of this power, it ceases to work on them any longer. And it's likely that Rogue, after all this time, would both know about Remy's hypnotic and natural charms. Number 4. Mental defense. Gambit's ability to manipulate kinetic energy means that he is almost always surrounded by it, which grants him an electrostatic field. This basically acts like a mental shield and protects him from those who would probe his thoughts. Professor X once likened trying to get into Remy's mind to trying to hold on to a bunch of snakes, and Psylocke has also struggled when it comes to breaking through Gambit's mental defenses. It doesn't help that Gambit also specifically will focus on misleading thoughts when he feels someone trying to make their way into his mind, which only makes attempting to use telepathy on him feel even more impossible and frustrating. Number 3. Healing factor. While this has never been explicitly confirmed, we have seen Gambit both withstand and recover from a number of devastating blows within a short amount of time. It has been suggested that he may be able to harness kinetic energy in order to heal himself, which might also explain in how Bishop's timeline he survived long enough to be an elderly man who remembered the X-Men and was known as the Witness. If he was actually the Witness, that is. That theory has really never been fully confirmed or denied. Number 2. Molecular manipulation. On the alternate Earth of 9921, Gambit becomes New Sun. New Sun is basically Gambit with his powers unlocked to his full potential. This version of him was so powerful he ended up killing his Earth's Phoenix. His kinetic powers far surpass those of his Earth 616 counterpart, to the point that he can manipulate kinetic energy on a molecular level. He could heat up molecules or cool them down, and could stop a person dead in their tracks. And he no longer had to touch objects to make them explode. He could even transform himself into energy, manipulating his own molecules and converting himself into energy waves. Number 1. Toxic conversion. During Gambit's run as Apocalypse's Horseman of Death, Gambit had this power. He agreed to be one of Apocalypse's horsemen, believing that Apocalypse would be the salvation of the mutants, and that if Apocalypse turned on them, that Gambit would be able to stop him. Fortunately, didn't quite work out as Remy had hoped, and he ended up actually attacking his former teammates, the X-Men. As a result of this transformation, he gained the power to transform air into deadly poison, even once threatening to do so to his own master, Apocalypse, after regaining his sense of self and remembering who he truly was. Thanks for watching, Nerd Squad. Are there any powers you feel like we left out? What are some of his powers that you think make Gambit super cool? How do you feel about the fact that Gambit's solo movie project involving Channing Tatum was cancelled? Let us know in the comments below. I personally was looking forward to hearing what a Cajun Channing Tatum would sound like, but I also feel like Gambit is a really hard one to cast. Number 10. Leadership. While he might not be the leader we'd all like for the X-Men, Scott Summers is more often the one that his fellow mutants need. Professor Xavier actually trained Cyclops for the role since day one as a young mutant who had been there since the beginning. So when people ask if he deserves to be a leader, the answer should be an emphatic yes, as he has been training for this role pretty much his entire life. A master tactician, Cyclops usually has his eyes on the bigger picture when it comes to problem solving, meaning sometimes, in order to achieve something good, he can be willing to do something that other heroes might deem as bad or downright dastardly. He kills people. He remade X-Force into a team of child assassins. He became a martyr on purpose, sacrificing himself because he knew the younger mutants needed someone to become their symbol to rally around. So, while we may not always approve of his actions, the bottom line is Cyclops is still one of the best when it comes to prime leaders in the Marvel universe. While a very different character, he's on like a Captain America level of leadership. And that's like people universally agree to that, so not making that up. I know you're all thinking it. 9. Shapeshifting. Rogue has absorbed the powers of her adoptive mother Mystique a handful of times, but not for the reasons that you'd expect. While she did gain Mother Dearest's powers, Rogue touching Mystique was for other reasons. She wanted to better understand her mother. Adoptive mother, rather. As you know, Rogue doesn't just absorb abilities, but thoughts, memories, etc. In one case though, outside of the comics, we did get to see Rogue use Mystique's powers. Sort of. In the X-Men the Animated Series, after Rogue had absorbed Carol Danvers and the latter's psyche was becoming the more prominent of the two, she ended up using Mystique's powers to shapeshift into her previous body. You got a complicated past with your mother, so I'm just gonna use your mother's powers to make you look like me. Moving on to number 8. Death. Prior to Rogue being able to control her powers, a lingering touch of hers could be deadly. Typically for those who had superpowers or were powerful mutants, her touch would cause damage and might even put them into a coma. But in the case of someone with a physiology like Carol Danvers, psyches were merged. But what about for a regular human? It's no bueno. Rogue's touch is practically the touch of death. For regular non-powered humans, Rogue's touch could very well be fatal, sucking their strength at an accelerated and alarming rate that our human bodies cannot handle. Moving on to less depressing territory, and at number 7, she can manipulate ice. Wonder whose powers she absorbed to get this little trick. If it wasn't already
already obvious, this skill set of Rogue's was the byproduct of touching X-Men teammate Bobby Drake, aka Iceman. It's a power that she's borrowed from Bobby on multiple occasions, not only for use in combat but for other means too. Bobby's ice manipulation powers, which might I add are Omega level mutant abilities, allow him to decrease the thermal energy around him in order to create ice structures. His creations will not break unless he wills them to. So you can imagine how this was useful for Rogue in Avengers vs. X-Men, when a whole lot of rebuilding was required after a failed attempt to use the Phoenix Force occurred. Moving on to another X-Men member here in at 6, phasing. Okay, personally Kitty Pryde's phasing powers were always the mutant ability that I wanted growing up, so I am a big fan of this number. In Uncanny X-Men issue 194, the X-Men are almost bested by villain Nimrod when Kitty Pryde has an idea, and it's a good one too. Out for the count and being carried around by Rogue, Kitty decides to push her head up against Rogue's, forcing the mutant to absorb her powers, psyche, thoughts, and memories of her teammate. This spawns a greater plan in which Rogue then absorbs Wolverine, Colossus, and Nightcrawler's powers, using them to attack the sinister robot, smashing it to bits. Although Nimrod ends up rebuilding itself and teleporting away, it's still a pretty big win for the X-Men. Up next, number 5, weather manipulation. Storm is the second Omega level mutant on our list whose powers Rogue has absorbed, and she's another teammate whose powers have been borrowed on more than one occasion. Now the first wasn't actually borrowed. They were in battle against one another and Rogue was still doing that whole villain thing. She would fight Storm and steal her powers. Guess that kind of stuck with Aurora, because the next time that Rogue would find herself borrowing the weather manipulator's abilities was when Storm had to offer her powers willingly to Rogue in Uncanny X-Men issue 185. But it wasn't for combat, and it wasn't used the way that Rogue used Bobby's powers. Instead, it was in order to give Rogue a new perspective, opening the young mutant up to trusting Storm and seeing the beauty that the Earth had to offer, versus Rogue's prior cynically inclined outlook. You brought them closer together. Moving on to number 4, reality warping. So Scarlet Witch is arguably one of the most powerful superheroes in the Marvel Universe, albeit being slightly unstable at times. Rogue has stolen her powers on a few occasions, but perhaps the most memorable one took place in Uncanny Avengers issue 2, volume 2. After absorbing Wanda's powers, Rogue had some trouble with it, the power being what she called a, I quote, confusing idiot power. She was unable to make use of the abilities right from the get-go, and she couldn't control it either. Nothing actually happens with these powers aside from her hands glowing. Why? Well, Wanda explains it as Rogue lacking the imagination to use her reality warping powers. Kinda savage, but does make sense. Up next at 3, physical trait absorption. We mentioned this ability in our intro, but we want to talk about the extent of this power of Rogue's, because often it's entirely involuntary. During the comic Fantastic Four vs. the X-Men issue 4, Rogue absorbs the Human Torch's powers. Now this doesn't only give her pyrokinesis, it gives her his fiery form that allows her to fly. While Rogue does make use of this for a brief period of time, she notes that this fire form completely obliterated her outfit, which was not fireproof. She could not control that. Sue Storm ends up using her powers to create a force field around Rogue, snuffing her out and leaving her completely naked. It's a bit of a distant shot of her naked though, so. Another time Rogue has absorbed a physical trait was when she absorbed Nightcrawler's powers on an alternate Earth, Earth 161. In this case, Rogue's powers did something a little unconventional. She ended up switching powers and appearance entirely with Kurt, which gave her blue skin and a tail, along with his abilities. This did not go over too well with Rogue. She kinda resented it. Up next, number 2, Rogue God of Thunder. Once upon a time, Rogue smushed her hand into Thor's face and stole his powers. I love the drawing in this panel. This was back in Rogue's more villainous early days, specifically in Avengers Annual Issue 10 when she faced off against Earth's mightiest heroes. Thor swoops Rogue off her feet, declaring he, I quote, knowest not who thou art. What follows is Rogue metaphorically slapping him, stating her name, and saying that he had her eternal gratitude for handing her victory on the proverbial silver platter, because she stole his powers and was about to whoop everyone. Oh, Thor. Sometimes his naivety is wonderfully endearing. And finally, in at number 1, she can recall past powers. In X-Men Volume 2, issue 107 from 2000, Rogue's powers mutated further. Not on their own though. This was due to an induced mutation by a telepathic mutant Skrull named Zakon. Now think of her as the Skrull equivalent of Charles Xavier. While it was not intentional, Zakon actually attempted to activate Rogue's powers to evade bounty hunters, the side effects allowed for Rogue to recall previously absorbed powers. And because of this, Rogue found herself having difficulty controlling which powers manifested when, occasionally boasting Wolverine's claws and Cyclops' optic blasts. This was temporary though. Alright, there we have it friends. What are your thoughts and feels about Rogue? So with that in mind, let's get to it. Starting us off in at number 10, Miss Marvel powers. Once upon a time, Rogue permanently absorbed Carol Danvers' psyche and superhuman abilities, when Danvers was Miss Marvel. As you can imagine, this screwed around quite a bit with Carol. Essentially, the two minds shared one body, but it gave Rogue a whole new set of abilities, including flight at wickedly fast fast speeds, the ability to repel bullets, superhuman strength, stamina, durability, reflexes, speed, and a precognitive sense. Damn. Not only did she gain her powers, but she also gained Carol's human Kree physiology, which made her incredibly resistant to most poisons and toxins. Eventually though, Charles Xavier was able to separate the two, but it has left a little bit of tension between Carol and Rogue over the years.
Number 9. Telepathic link and twin bond. This power feels like it's almost based off of folklore. Betsy and her twin brother Brian share a unique connection. They have a strong telepathic link to one another. This link has actually helped the twins to sense when the other is in danger and rush to their side to help them. People have often believed that the time shared in the womb actually allows twins in the real world to share an almost psychic link to one another, sensing one another's emotions or physical states, even while separated. Studies have even actually been conducted on this subject, and while I don't think it makes a lot of sense scientifically speaking, I know that my twin sisters have experienced some pretty freaky twin telepathy moments, so maybe there's a real world thing to this, I don't know guys. Beyond being linked to her brother, Psylocke has the capacity to be linked with just about anyone. When her mutant powers actually surfaced, she found herself instantly and overwhelmingly telepathically connected to millions of people, not having much control over her powers just yet. This caused her much grief initially, though it has proved a useful power throughout her development. Number 8. She's a spy. Psylocke is a master of shadows for many reasons, one including her prowess as a spy. She worked as a spy agent on the Psi division of Strike, the special tactical reserve for international key emergencies. Well, for a time. An oddly, conveniently cool acronym for what was basically MI6 with a wider net. During her time working as a Psi agent for Strike, she would plot to infiltrate the Hellfire Club. She worked on the Strike Force undercover, with her cover life being that of a working fashion model, pun intended. This was also the time we saw Betsy make a dramatic change to her hair. Up until this point it always matched her twin brother Brian, aka Captain Britain's blonde color, but she would then start dyeing it purple and never look back. Her purple hair has since become an iconic part of her look. Number 7. Telepathic resistance. The weird thing about this power is that it never seems to be fully explained. Some mutants train to get this and others just seem to possess a natural resistance to telepathy. Beast appears to fall more into the second category, cause you know, you can't be an X-Men unless you have some level of telepathic resistance. However, Beast's resistance to telepathy is kind of dumb because, well, he's not that great at it. It basically just means he is not openly vulnerable to telepathic influence, but when up against a powerful or potent telepath, or if someone can use his fears, like Cassandra Nova did against Beast, his resistance quickly breaks down. So this power is kind of a dumb one because it's just, well, it's not that useful. And after all, the X-Men are more often dealing with powerful telepaths than low-level ones, so. Number 6. Force fields. Beyond having the physical and tactical skills to take down an opponent, Psylocke can also guard against physical attacks when she wants to, and even shield herself from things like magical explosions or fire. Using her telekinesis ability, she can construct a force field around herself and others to protect from incoming attacks. It isn't an effortless ability, however, as it does require a lot of mental strength and focus on her part.
Number 5. Acute senses. Okay, you know about the senses, but did you know how precisely acute they are? This goes beyond being able to follow a scent, and instead dives into the realm of she can tell individualized things about a person from their scent. For example, if they have high cholesterol. And she can do this for hours afterwards, long after other creatures would have lost the scent. This of course makes her a super dangerous opponent if you're trying to hide from her, because you have to do so much more masking than just dousing yourself in Axe cologne. I covered myself in cologne, she'll never find me because I smell sauvage.
Number 4. Magic immunity. After Jamie Braddock resurrected Psylocke, she was brought back with some different abilities. While she no longer had her shadow teleportation power, she found she was now immune to telepathic or telekinetic interference, and Jamie even insisted that she had a resistance to magic, specifically reality-altering magic. He apparently had made sure she was brought back with these resistances, as he needed her in order to defeat the Forsaken. Number 3. Secondary mutation. This is apparently the power and ability that we have to blame, which has caused Hank so many changes over the years. He developed a secondary mutation as a result of consuming his serum, which he sought to protect from being stolen, and this caused him to mutate more, and caused him to enhance his mutation permanently. Long term, it is suspected that this has continued to affect the evolution of his mutation, causing him actually to also continue to change and awakening within Hank recessive genes in his DNA, which have caused him to revert to a more animal-like appearance. He's like a two-way evolution, embodying the strengths of those we evolved from and the advancements of the modern man, shown by his advanced intellect. This becomes in and of itself a little bit silly, though, when you realize that it means he went from ape to cat because of this. So I guess who knows where to next, because I would think, you know, maybe cat then ape. Ape is like all the way at the back, right? I don't know. Someone that studied evolution, let us know in the comments. Number 2. Flight. You may know of Psylocke's famous butterfly aura that surrounds her eyes and face while using her telekinetic abilities. Likewise, she can also use her telekinesis to give herself metaphorical wings and allow her to take flight, though she is also sometimes pictured with that neon pink butterfly wing-like aura on her back while soaring around. So sometimes it does actually look like she has wings, telekinetic wings, which is also kind of fitting considering how romantically close she and fellow X-Men Angel have been over the years. This seems to be an ability that writers sometimes also forget about though, so she doesn't use it that frequently. You can see her take flight in the Uncanny X-Men series from 2016, volume number 4, if you want to see that, which I mean, who doesn't want to see Psylocke fly? It's super cool. Number 1. Invisibility. When you think of Psylocke, you may think of her stealth abilities. She is a spy, a ninja, an assassin, and has been known to shadow teleport. But what you might not think about when it comes to her stealth is her power of invisibility. Yes, she can turn invisible. This power comes from her telekinesis skills. Although it's not often seen, she has used it before in the comics. This, combined with her astral projection abilities, makes her an even more stealthy mutant than you might initially suspect, though as we've seen, it doesn't do anything when it comes to cloaking her from Mr. Fantastic. Unsurprisingly, trying to use invisibility powers to sneak up on a man who is married to the Invisible Woman is really, well, not the most effective way to use that ability. I'm sneaking, and Reed Richards is like, I know you're here. I'm used to invisible people, it's kind of my thing. Number 10. Temperature resistance. The crazy thing about this power isn't so much that it exists, but that it appears to have always existed. Even before Beast had his iconic fur, he was resistant to cold. A fur coat makes sense for this, but his randomly being cold resistant doesn't really make a ton of sense without it. Although this is also back when Beast had an insane healing factor and could heal from almost any injury, similar to Wolverine or Deadpool. A temperature resistance makes sense for a furry character who would be insulated, or even a character who I guess is known for their endurance. However, the weird carryover of this power as Beast has changed over the time, from having a healing factor to a blue fur coat, is just kinda strange. Number 9. Magic. In the 2016 series of All New X-Men, we see Hank turn from scientific pursuits to those of a more magical variety. What makes this fairly silly is his sort of resentment and disbelief surrounding magic, as he specifically attempts to use magics himself. It was a weird exploration of his character when writers decided to incorporate a bit of magic into his world, as Hank has always been known as a man of books, and maybe of fantasy in a more romantic or literary sense, but certainly not in a magical superpower sense, so. Number 8. Handy feet. One of the powers that I've always found to be both silly and useful is Beast's enhanced dexterity. He can use this skill in combat to turn himself into a skilled acrobat, dodging blows, stealthily leaping across rooms, gracefully landing where he is needed, and helping in the fray to defeat the enemy. But he can also use this skill to perform mental tasks with his feet. Why? Well, usually because he's busy reading. He's used his feet to type, pour liquids out of beakers, and even once used them alone to fight as he was trying to read during the instigation. How one could truly focus on both, I can't even comprehend. I guess because of his enhanced intellect? Or maybe he was just like me when I try to multitask while reading, and he's just like stuck reading the same sentence over and over and over without it sinking in. But maybe he just didn't want to admit that. So it looks like he's reading, but really he's just reading the same sentence.
Number 7. Toe claws. So while X-23 has 2 bone claws that emerge from her hands, she also has another that emerges from the front of her toes, just in between. And these were coated in adamantium. This toe claw could prove very useful, and does. Who's expecting an attack from that low down? Very few people. Also, one good slice of the Achilles tendon and that's it. Crippled for life. It makes kicks all the more deadly too. You can get so much power behind your leg. Listen to me, I'm really pushing for this toe claw.
Number 6. Giant hands and feet. Originally, Beast started out as a normal-ish looking man, simply having large hands and feet, which he was ridiculed for in school, so I guess It's not completely normal. Visibly, this appeared to be the only super thing about him. Granted, he was also super strong, super agile, and speedy at the time as well. He also had that advanced intellect that we love. But while looking mostly normal, this weird feature that seemed to come along with his mutation and powers was an odd one. Namely because other mutants with similar enhancements to speed and strength and agility don't really seem to share it. They don't really have like large hands or large feet. I know not all mutants are the same, trust me, do I know that, but still, it was a weird trait to give Beast, especially when you would expect someone with large hands and feet to be, more clumsy than dexterous. Yet Marvel decided to go the opposite way with it. Number 5. Psionic Blasts. In a fight against Archangel, Psylocke used this newfound power to knock him out. Her psionic blasts can be deadly actually, despite the fact that they don't really inflict physical damage. Instead, these blasts attack Psylocke's opponents mentally, though they can still inflict mental pain. Psylocke is also capable of wielding the psionic energy on such a level that she could create an explosion. Psionic explosions! Number 4. Minor pheromone manipulation. Sometimes heroes have powers that we really get to see in action, and these are the powers that always blow me away. For Hank, one such power is his ability to secrete pheromones which make members of the opposite sex become attracted to him. While it has been mentioned in a copy of the official handbook of the Marvel Universe X-Men edition from 2004, we have yet to see Hank really utilize it. He has had a fairly active love life, and Abigail Brand, who has been a longtime love of his, has even expressed an interest in starting a family. But it's more likely that it is simply Beast's personality and soft blue fur that have caused women to just fall for him, not his use of pheromone power. Unless there's something we don't know, and Beast is maybe just like a master manipulator. He's just secreting pheromones all the time and that's why it all happens. Oh my goodness. I'm not ready for that revelation. It'd be weird.
Number 3. Weapon Hex. Weapon Hex is the version of Laura Kinney that is an amalgamation of her and the Scarlet Witch, though the character retains her name and most of her backstory. What is largely changed is that she is meant to be the perfect vessel for the occult, and her powers have a magical slant to them as well. That's the Wanda in her. So Hex 23 is from Warp World, the world created when Gamora, wielding the Infinity Gauntlet, folded the realm of the Soul Gem in half, where she was keeping the character's souls. Weapon Hex was one of the characters who decided to stay mashed together when the amalgamation of their universe was revealed, and Weapon Hex even went on to become part of the Defenders team.
Number 2. Claws and Fangs. This addition to Beast's physique definitely makes sense as it came with the change of his appearance into a more beast-like and ape-like state, but it's still, it's kinda ridiculous, mostly because Beast doesn't really use either of these things. The juxtaposition of his calm and curious nature with his beast-like physique and features makes a lot of Beast-related powers and assets feel kind of misplaced, or I guess just wasted, because he doesn't really like to connect with them or utilize them that much. The same can be said about his long claws and features, which typically end up as just ornamental and used by writers to make Beast feel like even more of an outcast than he already does. Which is sad. I want him to just feel good about his appearance. I guess sometimes he does, but sometimes he doesn't. And he wants to cure himself, and I'm like, no, I'm conflicted. Number 1. Animal Instinct. Hank might view this trait as a weakness, oddly enough, but I would argue that it's not a weakness because it makes him stronger. It makes him do things he would not normally think to do. It makes him hesitate less. He would likely be able to apprehend more villains than not, catching them off guard with his sheer strength and speed and focus. He also might kill them, but they'd be stopped at least. But Hank fears his animal side, which alienates him from it and causes any instincts he taps into to be rebuked as opposed to embraced. Really, I think he just needs to take a page out of Wolverine's book, tap into his instincts, and let go a little bit more. Facing his fears would only make him stronger, I think, and eventually give him more control over a power that could be better utilized.
Number 10. Reattach limbs. Now, one of the powers Wolverine, and hence his clone, is most known for is the healing factor. This healing factor is meant to render them potentially immortal, but in the case of X-23 it also means that she can reattach limbs. They will rebond and perform as good as new. Certainly a useful trick, definitely faster than waiting for them to grow back, and less gross, although you can make that funny. Just look at Deadpool. Still, it says a lot that in her short life X-23 has already suffered such brutal injuries that this is a known fact. Sad times. Number 9, as mentioned, immortality. Now, one of the perks of an out-of-control healing factor with perks being placed in quotation marks, is the potential to live forever. There's something about your cells constantly healing that allows you to not have to age in the same way others do. Instead of your cells decaying, you're just producing perfect copies. Because of this, you get the joy of living past all your friends and family and watching the inevitable march of time and potential destruction of all. At least in the Marvel Universe, you won't have to do it alone. Heck, Laura will even be able to do it with a couple of people that she actually likes, like a little vampire coven, only with mutants. Which hero would you want to spend eternity with? I mean, if any. Eternity is a long time. Number 8. Gabby Kinney, aka Gabrielle Kinney, aka Honey Badger, aka Scout. Now she is another of Wolverine's clones, and as such in a way a sister to X-23, but she showcases some of the powers Laura could have had things gone just a little bit differently. For example, Gabby has an insensitivity to pain. This was a result of further genetic experimentation on the part of Alchemax, and it's made her quite the dangerous little creature. A lot of barriers and restrictions are removed if one can't feel pain. There is an actual condition where people can't feel pain, and it's really dangerous. This is because you can get pretty badly hurt and not even know it. It also removes some of that innate fear factor that you know is necessary for our survival.
Number 7. Astral projection. Using her telepathy, Psylocke can project her astral form, allowing her to explore the astral or physical plane outside of her body. While in the astral plane, she can use her abilities to alter the environment around her, and even create psionic weapons, much like she can while inhabiting her body on the physical plane. There was even a time when she was undetectable in her astral form. That being said, she can easily be harmed while in her astral form when facing those who are stronger than her, like in Uncanny X-Men Volume 1 when she went up against Mr. Sinister.
Number 6. Poison immunity. Now some of you may be saying, yes, we know about the healing factor. Fair enough. But the degree to which X-23 is immune to poisons is truly impressive. We're not talking you give her poison, she's felled, and needs to wait it out as her healing factor slowly cures her. No, we're talking it takes a massive dose in the first place to even have any effect at all. She's just operating at such an enhanced capacity that what would affect an average person won't affect her at all. Definitely useful as a being created as a living weapon, but also just for anybody. That would be a relief. I mean, for those of you who are really concerned about being poisoned.
Number 5. Doesn't need to sleep. Apparently, having his form change from ape-like to more feline-like not only stole a digit from Beast's hands, but also changed his sleeping patterns. He mentions this during Astonishing X-Men Volume 1, Issue 25. The issue starts off with Beast singing, and we follow him until he runs into Xavier Institute student Armor, aka Hisako Ichiki. She reminds him of her threat to shave Japanese obscenities into his fur while he sleeps if she caught him singing again, which obviously she has. Hank answers the threat by sharing with Hisako that he no longer really needs more than 2 hours of sleep a night. What? This might be a useful one for being pulled into a fight in the middle of the night or needing to keep watch, but it also just seems like such a random superpower to have as a byproduct of an outward change of physical appearance. Yeah, that's right, Beast micronaps apparently. He's got some small sleeping skills. Strange. Especially considering many cats that I've interacted with seem to be pretty sleepy creatures, so this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Number 4. The Venomverse. Like pretty much every character, Laura Kinney was featured in the Edge of the Venomverse event, and stood out for some because of just how cool and intense her venomized Wolverine costume was. Fun fact, in the main verse when Wolverine died during the time we were pretending he was gone for good, Laura took up his mantle to honor him. And it was a legacy passing of the torch that some people really enjoyed, and are salty about how now she's gone back to being X-23. Some claim that it's being bumped back. Some even say that her name is a slave name. It gets intense out there sometimes. Now, unlike some characters who were essentially window dressing in the Venomverse, X-23 had a whole story arc. This involved a new origin where she managed to escape captivity thanks to bonding with the Venom symbiote, and as a result had a pretty good relationship with it. We got to see this in Edge of the Venomverse number 1, and for some it was an excellent primer for what was to come.
Number 3. Pilot. While it might not be as interesting as some of her other professions and power sets based around being a spy and, a ninja, way before any of that happened, back in the original Captain Britain Volume 1, Betsy was known for her skills as a pilot. Truth be told, we never really got to see said skills, but they were acknowledged by her brother Brian Braddock. Betsy seemed more to downplay them, and then while flying, a light kinda hit her and caused her to hallucinate, and then she crashed. Not really her fault, but it didn't really add any hype to this ability. Still, based on what Brian said in issue 8 of Volume 1, we can't assume that Betsy was an accomplished charter pilot. Just never really got to see a lot of it.
Number 2, her training. Now when it comes to X-23, most think of her mutant abilities, but she is also highly intelligent. She has been trained to infiltrate with ease. It was for these reasons that she was trained as an acrobat, trained to speak multiple languages and master martial arts. All of this she can do because she has a far above average intellect. So she's more than just a ball of rage, far more. And number 1, Enigma Force, aka the Unipower, aka Captain Universe. Yes, X-23 got the powers of Captain Universe. I mean, that entity is down for whoever will bond with it, really. At first, Laura was reluctant to take on the Unipower, but she eventually did, and like most people with those powers, they get a sweet Captain Universe style costume upgrade, and they get to wield the power cosmic. While possessing the Enigma Force, one is essentially a god. The Unipower was interested in her because it wanted to make use of her healing ability. Their time together was brief, but for some fans, pretty memorable.